We as men have a fundamental problem with the feminine. See, we no longer see the feminine as beauty, as something to give ourselves to, as something to ravage, as something to adore, as something to love, as something to put all of our life into, but we see it as something to fear. And when we start to see the feminine as an enemy rather as the opposite that completes us, we're not actually starting a war with women, we're starting a war within ourselves. Let's talk about beauty. Let's talk about the feminine, the woman, what men live for, and all these different things that get ignored and overlooked by our society, but let's bring it back to that beauty. Bring it back to the sex. Let's bring it back to what makes men men and women women. And where this all comes from is we were on a call. We were on our sex and relationships call, which is an amazing thing. Guys, if you are interested in bettering yourself and your life in everything at the core, whether that's starting with sex or your finances, or your purpose, your ambition, your career, your lifestyle, body, mind, fitness, check out Men's Development Excellence. There's actually a special link down below for a sale that's all going to change in June. Just check it out. It's good stuff. But the essence of beauty, what does it do to a man? And see, so much of men's pain, so much of what drives men, so much of what confuses men, what propels men to achieve greater parts of themselves is that beauty of a woman. Yet in our culture, in our society, it's denied, it's distorted. You know, how do we see sex? Where does sex come up in a conversation? In order for us to have dialogue about what it means to be a sexual man, a sexual woman, what we enjoy about sex, what's right and wrong about sex, we're propelled into this conversation of hysteria. We have to have arguments about it. We have to be fueled. We have to have our pain speak. We have to be louder than the next person. But what we don't realize is sex is one of the most fundamental things about us. It's what makes us human. It's what drives our choices. And of course, human beings are much more than just their sex, but we are nothing without it. And see, one of the things that we were talking about on the sex and relationships call is how much men go through pain and confusion for the love of a woman, for the love of her femininity, for the only way that she can make us feel, the only way that the look about her can drive us wild. That in a relationship, we're driven to be better men. And that when we see these things only as power, as objectification, and once again, all these things can fit in a relationship. There can be power, there can be objectification from both sides. But fundamentally, what drives a man is that beauty, that essence of the feminine, that worship of what it is. And this is the dialogue that we don't have with men anymore. And let me just rewind back to this, because how we came up with this followed a certain path. As we were talking about our mindset when we are in a relationship. And we were talking about how our mindset is as a man when we first meet a woman. She's a beautiful woman. She's a woman who is maybe everything that we've wanted and fantasized about and all these different things, but what are some of the things that we think? And as we talked about this, we realized, man, I'm excited for her. I want attention from her. And at first, some of the guys were saying like, oh man, I want to have sex with her. I want to take her home, da da da. But as we got into it of really what they thought, what they thought when they were young, when they were older, when it happened last week was like, oh my God, man, I can do so much for that woman. I can do so much for her. We don't even know her. We know nothing about her, but that beauty, that sex, that body shape, that smile, that carefree expression, whatever it is from her, lured us into a mindset that we don't visit very often, and into a mindset that oftentimes men are ashamed of. And then we talked about, well, let's say we talked to the girl and it started to go good. She started to like us. What do we start thinking then? We start thinking that those personal traits that she's sharing with us, that smile, that closeness, that scent, all these different things, we could be a part of that experience. And as a man, we're driven to want that and care for that even more. And then a week goes by and then the date gets set up. We start having sex and these different things. We broke down every little increment of that beginning part of a relationship and how our mind thinks. And so much of it revolved around what we could do for her, how life with her made everything seem possible. And this is the feminine. This is what it does to the masculine, and what the masculine does to the feminine is a similar experience, yet different. Yet we as men were so afraid to talk about that. We're so afraid to chase. We're so afraid to be enamored with, taken back by. We're so afraid to be swept away, because if we are, we might be weak, because we might be hurt, because we didn't build up a foundation of ourselves, because we didn't get to know who we are, because we were afraid of what beauty would do to us. When we are afraid of what the feminine may do to us, we hate the feminine. And God, what a terrible thing to deprive yourself of. And you know what's funny about all of this is many of the guys who are part of our course are divorced, and they've had a messy divorce. That's never fun. It hurts everybody when that happens. But what was interesting is when that marriage started to go bad, when we started that phase of not having sex, when we started that phase of resentment, and how the relationship mind changed. Instead of being fearless and seeing possibility in everything, we started to see that we were caged, we were imprisoned, that we were fooled, that the times that we were enamored with this woman were all a lie and we were tricked and they didn't really happen, and had we known who she really was, then we would have never gotten into that situation and we were manipulated once again by the feminine. The feminine seduced us into being our weaker selves. And ultimately, if you follow that chain down long enough, these men got better. They started to change their lives. They focused on themselves, whether it was in my groups or they did it separately. They became men that were empowered. They became men that were focused. They became men that were better because of a woman's beauty, because they were seduced, because they bought the lie, because they fell in love, because they showed that side. But what they realized from that was that one of the most powerful forces in the world is not just a woman by herself, but a woman with them, a woman with a man. And the changing in the emotion and the feeling allowed them to transform into something else, because the man that they were before, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, before they were sent to the floor by love, was not strong enough, and they had to become strong. And see, this is the beautiful story of love, and this is the beautiful story of relationships and men and women, is that we can't be afraid of each other. We have to learn to heal, to merge within one another, to better ourselves so that we could step up to the experience that is within us to feel the love of each other. And when that happens, if we are not strong enough, sure, we will be broken. We will be sent to the floor. We will be humiliated. We will have bad days that we wished could go away forever. But that's how we gain our strength. That's how we gain who we are. See, for me, I've had a life of sex. I've seen this. I've questioned everything while having those experiences. And for better or for worse, that's how I lived. I lived a life with women. I started that life because I had resentments towards women. I started that life because I wanted power. I started that life because I wanted to know what it was like to control the thing that I feared most. And you know what? There is a beauty in that. I will never discourage a man from understanding and experiencing what that feeling is. But if you have that feeling, if you have that experience, if you have that perspective without the open perspective of having a woman change you at its core, you are tremendously missing out. See, we're a culture right now where men and women have all these problems with one another. And the worst thing that we could do is divide. The worst thing that we could do is stop having sex. The worst thing that we could do is to regulate sexuality so that we don't get hurt. Meaning our fears are dictating our biological urge, our physiological urge, our spiritual urge for us to transform and change who we are. And the best thing that we could do is open ourselves, experience. Of course, be careful, be cautious, truly represent yourself. But don't be afraid of sex. It may have hurt you before and it may hurt you again, but it is through that that you build the strength to be the best possible you. We've taken the most natural thing that is within all of us and we've put it in a cage and expect that it doesn't take our humanity away.